Today's reading is from Nehemiah 1. Nehemiah was the cupbearer of the king, which I thought was like a taster, but it was something much bigger. He brought the king wine, and he was in the close quarters of the king, so he wasn't a lowly tester of poison. The words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah. In the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, "Those who survived the exile and are back in the provinces are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire." When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, "Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins of we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commandments, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. Remember the instruction you gave your servant Moses, saying, 'If you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are in the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling for my name. They are your servants and your people, whom you redeemed by your great strength and your mighty hand. Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. I was the cupbearer to the king." Here ends.
So let me ask you a question as we enter into 2026, and it's simply this. What is it that you're hoping for in the year of 2026? I mean, this is the thing we do every new year, right? We come out of the old, we go into the new, we come into the unknown, and we set goals, we set resolutions before us. So let me ask you this. What is it in your mind, in your heart? What is the things that you've been thinking through? Maybe it's not a formal declaration, just this thing that in the back of your head, you're hoping 2026 looks like, you're hoping it brings. Is it a new job? Is it a healthier lifestyle? For me, I have one very simple goal for 2026, and it's to finish something I started 5 long years ago. And that is, I want to finish school. For those of you who know, I've been in a degree since 2021, and what started as something really exciting at the beginning has turned into something really exhausting at the end. And can I just be honest with you, friends? I enjoy school. I enjoy the elements of working towards something and achieving something. But 5 years in, I'm done. I'm ready to be over it. I'm ready to get it finalized. There is something about starting projects that feel exciting on the front end, and I think some of us here know exactly what I'm talking about, that as we get toward the end can be burdensome. I'm ready to have more balance to my work. I'm ready to have more balance to my family, and I'm ready to have this thing not be the interruption to my life that it really has kind of become. Because when I'm in this form of school, when I'm toward the end of it, I find that my pattern of life looks like is I wake up, I go to work, I go home, I spend time with my family, I stay up late into the night, I work on my homework, and then I do the whole thing over again. The most challenging part, I think, of the whole school thing is the repetition of it, the patterns. Because I get these things on Monday morning. You want to know what they are? They're called assignments. Every Monday I have an assignment, and I have to comb through the material. I have to read things. I have to submit things. And if they don't come back to me satisfactory, I have to adjust them and go. Here's the problem with assignments is they come every Monday, and when I submit them each and every week, Sunday at 9 p.m., I don't have a whole lot of time to sit back, be satisfied, to celebrate another week done, because guess what's coming? Another assignment. And this repetition comes each and every week. I get to the point, usually about halfway through my semester, and I ask myself, why am I doing this? I mean, I don't need this. Technically, I don't need this degree to be able to do what I do. And if I were to quit, it would just make my life so much simpler. But you and I both know that's not the real me talking. That's the moment talking. That's the frustration, the fatigue. I know that for a slice of time, it is going to make my life more challenging. It is going to interrupt my life. But it's crucial for me when I have these moments halfway through the semester when I'm really feeling it, that I remember and remind myself what it is that I set out to do with this degree in the first place. And it's quite simply this. I have this burning desire within me to grow as a person. I had this thing where I was saying, can I actually accomplish this? And I have one life to live, and I have this opportunity in front of me. Am I willing to make the sacrifices? Do I have enough of the burn within myself to move toward this goal, even though I knew it was going to bring challenges? Am I willing to build into my future skills that would not only serve my career, but serve the church? And these reminders are crucial for me because I know that future interruptions with school are going to come. Personal sacrifices, they're going to be involved. So because of those things, I better have something really deep, really passionately burning inside of me to see my way to the end of those goals. Do you understand what I'm talking about here today? So let me ask you again, when you examine yourself, and especially as you go into a new year like 2026, what is it you're hoping for? Maybe the better way to rephrase that question is what is it that you burn for today? What are those things that you're looking to build into? Those things that you would be willing to look at and say, you know what? This thing is so important to me. I am willing to sacrifice. I'm willing to allow interruptions to my life because there is something bigger than just myself. I just believe this about human nature. Every single one of us burn for something. Every one of us do. Every one of us long to build into our lives. And when that comes, there will be certain assignments that are put in front of you. Now, I'm not talking necessarily about the assignments that a professor might put in front of you. Because anytime someone brings an assignment to you, what you have to do is understand what that word even means. See, we have this crazy way of thinking about that word. It seems like an ugly word to us, especially if you're like me and we have memories and nightmares about what it was like to go through high school and be late for our assignments. Assignments aren't necessarily drudgery tasks. These are important responsibilities. Another way of looking at it is a call that is put on your life, a burden that is placed before you. What is it that you burn for, that you would be willing to look for an assignment that you would root your life into in spite of the sacrifices it takes to see something bigger and beyond yourself come to fruition? I mentioned earlier, today we're beginning our new series, and it's really centered around the theme of 21 days of prayer and fasting, something we're all about here. If there's one thing I want us to be about here at Refuge Church is we want to be about prayer. We want to recognize that access to the Father was something that was costly. The cross made a way so that we don't have to jump through any religious hoops. We don't have to bring sacrifices to the temple. In fact, Hebrews states it so beautifully. We now have confidence to approach the throne of grace with boldness. Now think about that. If you had lived in the Old Testament, that concept would have been wild. I don't have to go to a priest. I don't have to go to an intermediary. I can just go right to God. And I can bring the sacrifice of my heart. I can bring the sacrifice of my prayer. I can hear from the Lord. Prayer is a beautiful thing. And the Lord Jesus brought that access for each and every one of us. So I just believe prayer is critical to any formation in our lives. But the problem is that we don't spend a lot of time in our lives, or we don't set aside enough time in our lives to be able to go to the Lord with the kind of prayer that allows us to be able to form and to hear from Him. And I totally get it. We're busy people. And we have lots and lots of distractions. So it's good for us seasonally to call for a special season, 21 days, where we intentionally detach ourselves from certain comforts in our day-to-day life and reprioritize that time and attention to our relationship with God instead. We want you to be positioned in 2026 so that you can grow in your faith with God, but also so that you can learn to hear from Him. Now, I say that because the more I walk with Christians, it's one of the things that's becoming apparent to me is many, many believers have walked years, even decades, and would say they believe the Scriptures. They've rooted their lives in it. They just haven't really had a moment where they've heard from God. So how do we do that? I believe that He wants to speak into your life with all my heart, that He loves you, that He has a purpose for you, that He longs for you, like any loving parent, to live out your potential. And so what I believe is that the Lord does have a word for you as we enter into 2026, and that word might look like an assignment that you have the opportunity to say yes to or no to. You remember the old TV show Mission Impossible? They made like 1 billion movies about it. There's that famous phrase whenever Ethan Hunt or whatever the other character was getting the potential task in front of him, your mission, if you choose to accept it, and then the tape would explode or something like this, right? A task is something important, an assignment is important, but it's also, friends, listen to me, a tremendous honor. Imagine a world leader or a famous celebrity. He comes up to you, and they have an important job for you to do. Whether or not you feel like you're suited for the task, would you not just pause and go, wow, I can't believe of all the people they would come to me? Well, what I want you to remember, friends, is that the assignment that comes to us comes from the living God who spun this universe into creation with a mere word. There is no one more worthy for our attention and our focus than Him. And I still remember my initial call into ministry when I was just a teenager. I didn't get all the details, but I remember it being the most significant moment of my life, because with that call, everything about the trajectory of my life up to that point finally started to make sense. There was purpose behind it. So I say this from personal experience. God does have a word for you. And when He does speak, He will always ask you to step out of the old, step into the new in a way that will change you. And it will be the most significant assignment of your life. The question is will you be able to recognize it as such when it comes your way? So that's what I think makes the story of Nehemiah so incredibly relevant for us today. Because his is a story that not only details how to recognize assignments, but how to respond to it when it comes. So let's unpack the story of Nehemiah a little bit here. Here are the details. The year when this first chapter comes out is 458 BC. We know the date specifically. It is over a century since the nation of Judah and its capital Jerusalem had been conquered by an empire that came through named Babylon. They had tore down the walls, they had burnt the city, and they'd burnt the temple, the symbol of Judaism, down to the very ground. They exiled the people throughout the rest of the empire. Now it's over a century later, 2 generations have passed, and the people have lived as a people of God, but not even in their own land. This empire, the Babylonians, have since been conquered by another rising empire called the Persians. The Persians were much more lenient than the Babylonians. They allowed people to practice their faiths and religions. As long as you paid your taxes and didn't rebel, they were good with you being you. And so 70 years after the Jews had first been exiled, the first waves of people are now allowed to go back to the capital, go back to the homeland of Jerusalem, and to start to settle there again, to rebuild the city. This is what the book of Ezra, right before Nehemiah, talks about. The first thing they do is they rebuild the temple, the symbol of their faith and their religion. But there's a problem. They have the walls that are still broken down, and because of that, they can't defend themselves. The thought is that if they can't defend themselves, then all the work that they've been doing to pour back into the city and to their future might be for nothing. That might seem silly to you and I today, but you have to place yourself into the mind and the situation of an ancient back then. 2,500 years ago, wars weren't something that might happen. Wars were something that always happened. The way that neighboring tribes worked was that oftentimes if they saw someone who was weak and vulnerable, they would jump at the situation. They would pillage you. They would take you into slavery. This was a very serious deal. Without walls to defend yourself, there was simply no future to be realized. The problem is that there were opponents to the Jews and the Jews resettling their territory. There are these historic tribes in and around what was at one time Judah. And these tribes were hostile toward them. They did not want the Jews to come back. They did not want them to resettle. They did not want the walls to be rebuilt. They did not want them to have a future. They wanted to stake claim to the land for themselves. So what did they do? They sent letters to the king, the Persian emperor Artaxerxes, and they said, these Jews are only building these walls because what they want to do is they want to stop paying taxes and they want to eventually rebel against you. And it's enough fear to set into the emperor's heart and mind that he calls them to cease building these walls, and for the next decade plus, they are sitting there as ducks ready to be picked off. Their position is very serious. Why is this important? Well, the Jewish population at this time in Jerusalem is very, very small. They predict that only about 2% of the global Jewish population was even willing to go back and resettle the people. So quite literally, if there are no walls, there's no future for the city. If there's no future for the city, then there's no future for the faith, and the people of God might disappear. They risk losing everything and fading off into the annals of history. And the reason that strikes a chord within us today is because I think that particular situation, though it looks different from our time and place, kind of feels similar, doesn't it? Don't you feel that there are all kinds of external threats to our faith? Don't you feel at times that there are categories internally and externally that make us look like, hey, you know what? Things don't look really good right now for Christianity. I mean, there's been all kinds of reports out there, especially over the last couple decades, about the decline of Christian faith in the West, although I do know that there's a big rebound going on that. Praise the Lord for that. Let's go, Jesus. I want to see more of that. But before that, hasn't there been a number of decades, really since the 1960s, where there has been a decline in faith, a decline in Christian principles and values, and it seems like at times that there's almost like a target on our back, especially in a country like Canada, where we like to promote multiculturalism and we like to promote all these multi-values, but it seems like when it comes to religion and faith, the cherry-picked one aspect of faith that always seems to get pointed, the one that always seems to get kind of punched down, especially those of us who are in the inside and feel it the most, is the Christian faith. It can feel at times like there are challenges to our present reality. So the scenario that Nehemiah is facing is very eerily similar to ones that we feel each and every day. But let me give you some assurances today. Our time is just like many others in the Christian church's history. There are many points throughout global Christianity where it looked like the external threats were very real, like it looked like the threat of fading might be very imminent, and yet time and time again, God raised leaders to be able to set the people on a new path so that they could renew their faith. They could build, in a sense, walls to be able not only to defend their lives, their faith, their heritage, but to be able to build into the next generation. But it always started with a burden. A burden that was placed on someone's heart. A burden to restore what has been broken and to remember what has long been lost and to build. And this is what happens to Nehemiah. But here's the thing. His assignment does not come as a dream or divine call. It begins instead with a disruption. Look at verse 1 again. It says this. In the month of Kislev, on the 20th year, when I was in the citadel of Susa, that's the capital city of Persia, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The walls of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burnt with fire. Now, Nehemiah was not just another guy in the royal court. He was the cupbearer, which meant he was very, very important. What a cupbearer was in the ancient world was multiple things. Notably, it was someone who tasted literally everything before it went into the mouth of the emperor. This would have been someone that the emperor literally trusted with his life. So he has a unique access to the king. Also, he has the ability to vet those who would be coming close to the king. Because here's the thing about cupbearers. As much as they're willing to put their life on the line for the emperor, they don't want to get poisoned. So they're going to make sure that anyone they bring into the royal court to be able to speak to or get near enough to the emperor are going to be people who are trustworthy. Nehemiah's position is an honorable one. It is an important one, and there is no doubt he is living a fat and comfy life. He would have been like a member of the cabinet of the ancient days. He's already has it all. His life is safe, predictable, successful, and then all of a sudden this report comes, and what it is an invitation for him to move and do something, but it's also an interruption to his life. And I find this is so often how God brings assignments to people. It's usually not by appealing to our ambition. What usually happens is when God places an assignment on your life, and how you know it's an assignment is it awakens something in you, and the thing it awakens is usually a burden. And this is what Nehemiah feels when he gets this report from Jerusalem, that the walls are down and the future is not secure. Nehemiah could have felt just a little bit of sympathy. Nehemiah could have just sent thoughts of well wishes his way to the people. Nehemiah could have said, well, that's tragic, and just returned to his wine. He could have hoped someone else might deal with it. But what he chooses to exhibit instead is a broken heart over the situation. He could not turn away from it. And listen to what Nehemiah's response is in verse 4. He says this, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept for some days. I mourned and fasted and prayed." Now listen, friends. I've had some really bad days, but have my days looked like this, where I literally stop everything, and I don't eat anything, I don't touch any drink, and I weep, and I cry, and I mourn? This isn't the sort of action you do when you get bad news. This is something you react to when you're in grief, when you find out that someone has just died, when you find out there is a calamity in your family's life. You know, on the surface, this looks extreme, but his response that he gives you and I is, I think, the first movement to implement into your life when you receive that assignment from God. That comes when you receive burden. Don't just notice the problem, church, when it comes your way. Carry it. Absorb it. Let it get inside of you. When you look at a problem in the world, don't just hope someone else will do something about it. Ask the Lord, what is it that you're asking me to do? Sit with it a while. And in doing so, allow the burdens to align your heart to His. The first act of transformation that occurs in our hearts is when we choose not to sweep things away or numb away the pain or the inconvenience. But it's when we simply allow those things that move God's heart to move ours. And that's what Nehemiah does in this story. Nehemiah doesn't just take in the burden and park there. It moves him to something. See, he has developed over the course of his life certain reflexes to situations that will later be critical for understanding his next steps. By the way, we all have reflexes in life. Some are good and some are not so good, but I find that most reflexes are things that we've learned. For instance, over the holidays, one of the reflexes I developed as we got more and more into the month of December was what I call the reflex of reach. See, every time I walk through my kitchen, because there's so many events in the month of December and so many parties, and you are all so wonderful at leaving these gifts for us as a family. Usually they end up looking like brownies or cookies or candy or some sort of holiday treat. And because my kitchen is literally in between me and the exit of my house, The reflex of reach is something that every time I walk through the kitchen, I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just reaching for something. I'm reaching for a brownie. I'm reaching for a cookie, and I'm putting it inside of me. And let me just tell you, a month later, I am really starting to feel it, and not in such a great way these days. So I'm having to relearn that reflex. Can I tell you a more serious reflex I've learned that is not really healthy in my life, but it's particularly with screens, particularly my phone? I noticed that, especially when I'm incredibly busy in my work life, for some reason, one of the ways I have downtime and distract myself is just picking up my phone and start scrolling. And you want to know what I'm looking at? Nothing. Like I could tell you, like, the videos I'm watching and the articles I'm reading and the memes I'm looking at, but you know what it really amounts to? Nothing. But here's the problem is when you do that as a way to counter your busyness is that I caught myself a couple times over the break where I was literally reaching for my phone after I had just put it down. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going, why am I even reaching for this stuff? It's for no apparent reason. It's the reflex that I've learned. And reflexes are very real. And because they can be learned, there is a positive that can come out of that. And what Nehemiah's reflex shows that he learned is the second movement to implement into your life when you feel an assignment, and that's the reflex of prayer. And there's a very specific way that Nehemiah prays that I would invite you to look at in verse 4. He says this, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Then I said, Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keeps his commandments." Notice right there off the bat, his situation doesn't keep Nehemiah from acknowledging God for who he is. He still praises. He takes the moment to praise him. And this is going to be very important going forward, particularly the part about his keeping his covenant love. It moves to verse 7, and he says, "We have acted very wickedly toward you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses." And notice there he says, we, not they. What is Nehemiah doing with this? He's choosing to take ownership of the situation. Before he goes to any request, the first thing he brings before God is he recognizes the sins of his people and he stands in the gap for them and confesses them on behalf of the nation. Keep in mind, Nehemiah is not personally responsible for the exile. In fact, he was born into it. Yet in spite of that, he does not dismiss it. He does not shift the blame. He places himself inside the guilt of the people. And this matters because when God has an assignment for people, the work that God wants to do through you can't come before he allows the work to come in you. I am always trying to teach my kids to take ownership for their actions. The thing is that what I want to see them is not just in the individual situation they're facing. What I want them is to form into men, people who take responsibility, people who live up to certain things that they're called to. And what confession does is it allows us to clear the spiritual static in our air so that we can set ourselves up to hear God more accurately. And by confessing, Nehemiah is simply saying, God, you were right all along. You warned us countless times of what our sin could lead us to, which is always going to be the turning point in any revival. Before action can come, there must be confession. And it's what leads to the final part of this prayer. Verse 8 says this, "Remember the instructions you gave your servant Moses, saying, if you are faithful, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the nations. But if you return to me and obey my commands, then even if your exiled people are at the farthest horizon, I will gather them from there and bring them to the place I have chosen as a dwelling place for my name." This is where Nehemiah gets right down to his request. And you know what he's doing here? It's quite simple. He's calling God to remember. He's calling God to do what he promised to do. He's referencing a verse from Leviticus 26 where God predicts hundreds of years before this event ever happens that the people may be prone to such a sin that it would lead them into exile. But even in the midst of that prediction and that prophecy, the Lord says there is a way back when we turn our hearts back to him, when we own our mistakes, and we set ourselves to praying for our future. Do you want the strength of character to look at a desperate situation full in the face this 2026 season and have the wherewithal to actually do something about it? Well, then fill your mind with the Bible. Because when we remember the words of God, when we remember his promises, we can always turn to him and call him again, acknowledge that he will always fulfill his purposes and his promises, and ask him to do that. So this is the part of the invitation we enter into 21 days of prayer and fasting. We're not asking you to neglect food for entertainment for its own sake. What we're asking you to do is to fill your mind and your hearts with the things of God so that when you face your own situations, when God puts an assignment on your heart, you will be so filled with the knowledge of him and his ways that you will not only know what to do, but you will have the courage to do it. So I'm going to invite Russell to come and lead us in one last song. But just really quickly, Nehemiah 1 ends quietly. There's nothing really resolved in the situation in Jerusalem. The walls aren't rebuilt. There's no victory celebrated. The only thing that we have offered here is prayer, waiting, and readiness. And friends, that's okay. Because God's assignment does not start with action. It usually just starts with availability. And the defining question of this first text is not, can you build the wall? The question is instead, will you carry what God has placed on your heart? And God is still calling people to assignments today. He's not calling you to comfort. He's not calling you to celebrity, but to faithful obedience. And we're going to learn a lot about Nehemiah in the next couple of weeks. But what I love about this book and what it teaches us is that prayer is not what God's people do before the real work begins. Prayer is actually the real work that makes faithful rebuilding possible. And so God rebuilds what people are willing to weep over. As Russell leads us in this final song, maybe a great way for us to set our minds and our priorities to 21 days of prayer and fasting is if there is something that you're looking for in this coming year, if there is something that you feel God has put on your heart. We always have the prayer jar made available for people, and we usually have that earlier in the service, but we're actually going to call you in response to come and bring that offering before the Lord. If he's placed something on your heart, if there's something you're looking toward, if you're needing resolution towards something, or if you're just simply open to what it is that the Lord might be placing on you as we head into this next season, why don't you take a moment prayerfully during the course of this song to be able to write those prayers down and then at your own free will to come up and just place them in this jar as a symbol that you're ready to listen, you're ready to move when he calls you, and you're ready to allow him to be the center of your life in 2026.